Hey, Jaymee, we're back for another dose of truth. And we were just talking about our last episode where we talked about sort of survival and housing. And we want to kind of continue on that general topic because there's so much more to say, right? And so one thing I'll start with is, I've been thinking about this because I have a daughter who's in her early 20s, and, we talk. She's awake. I've raised her to know all this stuff. And, she was telling me she and her friends don't have anything to look towards. It's so bleak. Everything is constantly, there's constantly a weather event, there's constantly an economic event, there's constantly a war, there's constantly some kind of terror thing going on, and they can barely scrape by. In fact, they can't without parental help, no matter really what they do. And there's just not a lot going on out there that's about living and flourishing and thriving and life and interest. It's so grim. And I agree. This world has always been run by Satanists, pedophiles, psychopath, parasites, but at least, decades ago when I was a young person, you know, there seemed to be more opportunity, more future. There were things to do, there was creativity, there was social. That's the other factor. No one socializes anymore. I remember going out with my friends to this place where they would play music. I think it was a yoga studio, but they had music on the weekends and we'd go and pay like $5 and we would just dance, just have fun and dance. It wasn't even a bar, it was just a place to go dance. And then there was this kabuki place that had like a steam room and hot baths and saunas, and we'd pay $20 and go spend hours there and just soaking. And like there were things to do. You could still travel, it wasn't impossible because you weren't paying all of your money to housing, so like there was more optimism, there was more light, there was more future. And today, I wake up every day and I feel it, and I feel bad for people who are young today because it's so controlled, it's so grim that, like you said, they have come out of the woodwork. They're not hiding it anymore. It's really, really bad out there now.
Yeah, it's like a lot of, I stress about my own life sometimes and I think, oh God, like I'm in my 40s. Like imagine being 20 right now and
Yeah.
thinking about what's going to be my plan to make it in the world. What's some good options for me to do with my
Yes.
life? Like, and I have university too, and I'm like, it's so meaningless now. Like you can go,
Yeah.
before it was like if you were willing to work hard and get your degrees and stuff, and like now it's like, yeah, whatever, everybody has degrees, like they're pointless. They're, but half of them are, you know, people get fake degrees anyways. Like it's, there's just kind of like this, there's not really like an avenue to get from A to B. You know what I mean? Like you almost need to go and do something immoral and criminal to actually even just keep
Yes.
afloat. Like it's like there's not really these kind of like moral legitimate options, even hard work. Like you can work really hard and not get ahead. And so it's kind of like this feeling of learned helplessness, right? Where you can try and try and try, and there's no output from your input. And so I was saying off camera before that it was like just if there's a mathematical tipping point where you're like, okay, I'm not just going to sit here and run on a treadmill. Eventually, you're just going to get off because you're going to get tired or treading water, right? Like you're not actually getting anywhere. And so I think for people, and I think they're doing it on purpose. Like I think they're doing like a death and rebirth ritual. And we see this physically happening with the weather stuff to build the 15-minute cities. And a really good book is called The Shock Doctrine I think it's by
Oh yeah.
Naomi Klein. Is that
I think it is by
yeah,
her.
she
That's
talks
what, yeah.
about disaster capitalism and how they like destroy and rebuild. And like we've seen this with 9/11. And so this kind of stuff, they're always doing this kind of death and rebirth. So I think they are absolutely like wanting to devastate everybody emotionally, psychologically, physically, the physical structures. Like they're definitely doing the death ritual right now on us on so many different ways. Um, and something that I kind of was thinking about that I felt like I didn't really mention enough on the last show in regards to the housing And I mean, housing is, there's multiple ways they do this, but housing is kind of like a major way that they're getting everybody right now. And another side of it is the power dynamics, right? Of like how abusive people actually become when they're the one with the power. And like just looking at some of these rental ads, like when people are basically like, like send me a nude picture and I might respond to your ad. Like, you know what I mean? It's like almost that bad. There was even ads on there saying if any young girls need a place to stay and can help out in the bedroom, give me a call. Like there's all kinds of these creepy guys putting ads on there. And I'm thinking, you know what? There probably is a lot of 20-year-old girls that are like, what choice do I have? I can't even get a room to rent for under $1,000 right now. And I work at the mall. You know what I mean? Like, what are they going to do if they don't have a family to help them? And so it's mostly the people that don't have family that are like not going to have the option. So they're going to either compromise their own integrity just to survive. But then there's the other side of this where, it's kind of like Lord of the Rings, where the person who gets the ring, all of a sudden, the evil starts coming out of them. And I've just seen this so much with people that have places to rent right now. Like, it's just unbelievable, just kind of how rude even the ads are of like, basically, like, what are you going to do for me? Like, I have all the power. And we saw this in COVID too, where like people that normally are really powerless, like somebody that begs groceries at the grocery store, all of a sudden they get to be a prison guard, right? And it is the Stanford prison experiments. Like all of a sudden they're like, turning into a drill sergeant and like just, this is happening with the rental too. Not only are people staying in really bad abusive situations, staying with partners they don't want to be with, people who have kids can't move. Like when I used to work in housing, I used to take people down to the income support office and there would be like a bulletin board. And it was always like these creepy guys that were looking for a single mom with kids down at the welfare office. They would go and put the ads up there. And when the girls would call, it was like, oh, well, what are you going to do for cheap rent? Right. Like they're just predators looking to prey on people that are in a bad housing situation. And a lot of people in bad housing situations, like it's not their fault. They might have had an injury. They might have, be a single parent. Like these are just things people have to deal with. And when there's no option for them, they're really vulnerable to being abused. And there's just way too long of a list of people that are willing and getting ready to abuse them. Like it's like just a conveyor belt of, where these people are going to go. And so, yeah, I really wanted to mention that, like kind of the power dynamic of, people, it's like, as soon as they're kind of in the position, they're like, what are you going to do for me? That just really scares me, how many people you think wouldn't act like that. But when they do get the power, it's like, whoa, it's pretty common about human nature.
Yeah, and the cult counts on that. They need that. They can't do it by themselves. They need us to abuse each other, police each other, tattle on each other. I mean, you saw that during COVID. People
Mm-hmm.
became people became so hostile. I was accosted multiple times walking outside
Oh,
at a
yeah.
farmer's market, and you're not wearing a mask. It's like, do I know you? Like,
The,
get
the mask, the narcissistic masks really came off during
yes,
COVID.
yes.
Like,
And certain, it was an outdoor farmer's market, and certain booths would not sell me anything if I didn't put a mask on. I was like, well, I'll just go buy from someone else. But like they need us to abuse and pressure each other into
yep.
compliance and conformity. It's a major tactic. And you're right, the evil does. I knew Zimbardo, who was the architect of that Stanford prison experiment. He worked in the San Francisco jail when I did.
Interesting.
He told me about he was really quite shocked that it didn't take 48 hours. The experiment, for people who don't know, is they took some students and they just randomly divided half of them into being guards and half of them into being inmates in a fake prison. And it didn't even take 48 hours for the ones who were assigned as guards to begin to abuse their classmates who were assigned as prisoners. And I worked in jail mental health. So I saw this with my own eyes, Jaymee. So we're supposedly mental health professionals there to help people that are mentally ill, that are incarcerated. And I was extremely unpopular because I wanted people to be taken out of their cells so I could sit with them in a room and do counseling, talk to them, right? And I observed routinely everyone who came in there at first They were there for the right reasons, but just given enough time, they became as abusive as the rest of the prison structure was.
Mm-hmm.
It was
Mm-hmm.
really heartbreaking to see, but that's also, you're right, that's the case with everything. It's the case with, even after like they burned these, Lahaina or LA or whatever, people then were charging double for an Airbnb because people were desperate for a place to stay who lost a home, so the people that did still own things are now taking advantage.
Mm-hmm.
It's and it's like, but that is the success, unfortunately, of their diabolical plan to quote make us in their image. And they really have. We have become egotistical, self-serving, me, narcissistic, competitive, survival of the fittest, dog eat
Mm-hmm.
dog. And, it may be something that happens. I'm sure they've done animal experiments where they reduce the amount of resources and then the animals like go after each other, right? So even that is artificially created so that we will keep each other clawing and scratching exactly where the cult wants us.
Yeah, and a really good thing for people to watch is Mark Passio's presentation on de facto Satanism, because people actually don't realize they're Satanists because they don't understand what the philosophy of Satanism is. And all the things
Right.
you just listed and what you just said, Max, is basically what a satanic mindset is. And they do give us their mind and they incentivize it. So there's order followers, but like if you study hypnosis, or the least effective way to get somebody to do something is to make them do it through force, violence. You know what I mean? That's the least effective way. Most people don't need orders anymore. They've set up kind of a clockwork system that incentivizes evil, and people just do it willingly without even being having to be told to do it. And like um, there's like these, like you said about taking advantage, like there's these rental scams going on where people are ripping off people, the Airbnbs. I remember during COVID, we went to a restaurant and there was like a 16% gratuity on top of like the bill already. And I asked the guy, what is this for? And he said, just being open. And I just thought, well, then I'll just count that as your tip then, because I'm not like, whatever, like I'm not tipping you on top of that. That's so rude that you like forced me to pay you more just for being open. When they were making more money because the other places were closed. So it's just it's just greed on top of greed, and greed just feeds more greed. Like the thing about greed is, we can all be greedy sometimes, right? Like obviously everybody's like, oh, I want it. You see something you're like, I want it before someone else gets it. Like that. We all have that. But the more greedy you are, the more greedy you get, and you're actually never really fulfilled. And that's why you see these like people that have so much money, and they're, I'm always wondering, like, why are these evil Satanists, like they already have everything? Why can't they
Yeah.
just let it go? Like, why are they still trying to get more and more and more? It's because they're never actually satisfied. It's like being hungry and never feeling full. They're never satisfied. You know what I mean? When people vampire, they're not actually able to generate their own like good feelings or anything. They're never full. So like it never ends. The greed, the more people get greedy, the less satisfied they are. And so it is kind of a satanic trap that they get pulled into, and they're slaves of their own greed, right? So
Yeah.
the people that appear to be doing well are slaved in one way. And then the people that are fretting to survive, giving into these vampires, they're enslaved in another way. And so, yeah, we're all enslaved. And it's like, this is what we need to figure out as humanity. Like, when the snake's eating its own tail, if everybody is out for themselves, we're all screwed. Like this is like, that just sums up like what if people need to figure out. You know what I mean? But humans don't seem to be able to do it at this time. There's some humans doing it, but as a whole, humans still think you can be greedy and self-interested and that it's going to benefit the whole. It's not.
Yeah. Well, it's part of the despair that's been created too. There seems to be no way out. So what the fuck? Even if you want to have the right, it reminds me of some, I don't know, hip hop or rap song. I don't know the name of it, but there's a lyric that goes, well, I I can't pay my rent even though I work all day, so I might as well go to the club and just blow it at the club. It's that mentality. It's like,
Yeah.
well, if there's nothing, if I do the right thing and I can't even survive, then I might as well go to the dark side, you
And
know?
you see
So
that.
yeah, go
Sorry,
ahead.
go ahead.
No, go ahead.
You see that
Go
with
ahead.
the young people and the drug use, right? So there's so many
Yes.
people now that, not only it doesn't matter where you go in the world. There's just homeless camps everywhere, and everyone's, oh, they just are drug addicts. It's like, no, they're hopeless. They have no hope. There's no hope. Like you said, you can do A, B, and C, D, E, F, G, and you're still not getting to the next letter. Like there's no they I can't remember the term for this. I know I learned it in sociology class about like it was in a criminology class where they were talking about like what causes crime was when there's like too huge of a gap between a means and the end, right? So in countries where there's not like in poorer countries where there's not as much of a gap and there's not more people that are rich than other people and there's kind of no chance of ever getting, you're like you're all you're getting is like your food for the day, then like people actually don't go and do crime and get stressed out because it's like that is what it is. Whereas if you live somewhere like the States where you're like, oh yeah, like there's that chance of you getting the mansion and this and that, like that's what causes the crime is the gap and the comparison to others. And so in because of the learned helplessness now, there's all of the drug abuse and so people just have no hope. Like you said, Max, and I love that you just quoted a rap song, that's hilarious. But and that they just have no hope. And that's really common. And in Canada, now they're just offering people the MAID program. And most of the people that are taking the MAID program are people that have no hope, like they're just like there's no hope for me, or it's people that feel like a burden because they're older and they're like, well, my family's already so broke and I'm have cancer, I'm old or whatever, so I'm going to go like altruistically go and take this the death machine because it's like a service to others for me to just not exist and take resources. And it ties back to the last episode we did about how they're just trying to make everybody feel like there's no room for you here. We're all just ants on a pile trying to fight for that one apartment or that one place or that one parking spot. You know what I mean? They're always flooding more people into one area just to give us that feeling of like there's not enough, I have to compete, it's dog eat dog. And that's kind of what promotes the satanic way of acting to survive.
Yeah. Hi everyone, I'm Max Lowen with Unbroken.Global. I wanted to invite you all to my upcoming seminar about the Vatican. I'm going to expose everything I know and experienced there as a child. Some of the things I want to cover are the Vatican's role in the global cult, their role in terms of harvesting of souls and mind control, who they are in terms of being part of the Black nobility and Black Sun. I'm going to talk about things like the Bible, the ritual of communion, the cross imagery, and reveal what the ninth circle is and what they do in terms of the ritual sacrifice of children. And the fact that the Vatican is an arm of the global cult and the God they truly worship is Lucifer. So I look forward to meeting as many of you as want to attend. Open to any questions people will have. I hope we have a great conversation. And to sign up, check out my website, go under the classes tab and sign up. Look forward to seeing all of you then. Thanks so much. Yeah, another way that promotes, literally directly promotes the sexual abuse of children is many people in poorer countries, they can't even forget shelter, they can't even get food, you know. And so they're incentivized to sell their children into sexual slavery. And they do, because if they sell one child, then maybe they can feed the other two or three that they have, right?
Yep.
It incentivizes young girls to take modeling jobs that are all set up to capture them and then traffic them. It incentivizes people, innocent people, to try and, like, say, from Central America, to try and get into the United States because they have this idea that, life is better here, which is no longer the case. And they will get raped and their children will get raped on their long and arduous journey, but they don't have a choice. They're trying to escape nothingness, no food, no shelter. So these kinds of things, there's lots of runaway teens. I used to work with one when I worked in the jail, who pimp themselves out because they don't have any other choice to survive. I heard about recently because it was actually someone I met who's even like a sort of respectable mother type person is doing something called OnlyFans. So, again, and it's not exactly pornography, but it's kind of leaning in that direction. And like, so these platforms proliferating. I can't speak today. Uh, so this deliberate economic assassination, because let me just say, there's way more than enough resources on this planet for every one of us to actually live very well.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just that the few have 20 mansions and 20 private jets and obscene amounts of wealth that they would never spend in many generations of lifetime. It's not just that. It's deliberately created. We have the myth of overpopulation when we're actually underpopulated on the planet, and it's getting worse. So there's enough resources for everyone. So this is a satanic thing to create poverty, to create scarcity, to create survival, right? To strip away everything a human being needs to even feel safe in this
Mm-hmm.
world. And that is done deliberately to facilitate their favorite thing, which is pedophilia. So if you think that economic conditions don't are not directly satanic and associated with getting more children to ritual abuse, to rape, to sacrifice, and to kill, well, then you're delusional. There's a direct relationship between those two things today like never before.
Yeah, absolutely, Max. And thank you for saying that because you literally you literally just said what I had written down for my next
Oh,
point. Like you just read
sorry.
my mind. No, that's awesome. Like I was like, yeah, she's saying it because I was going to mention too the connection to rent and everything is and just forced competition, right? Because that's what Satanism is. It's competition, survival of the
Yes.
fittest. And so even though there is enough places for people, they flood it all into one place so that it feels like there's not enough. Like you have to live in a micro unit, you have to like only get one, that's just a psychological feeling. But look around you, there's tons of land, like we could expand outwards, but they're always like wanting everyone in these little condensation because it causes competition. And then also you have to understand that these people that do human trafficking, drug trafficking, all this stuff, all this money gets laundered into real estate. This is the number one place that people hide money is in real estate. There's people that the more they can pay for a place, the better, because that's where they can launder more of their money. So they don't want to pay $50,000 for a house. They want to pay 400,000 because that's how they're going to launder that money into real estate and hide it and have it sitting there in something real, right? So all of the inflation in houses, some of it's, on purpose, like the stuff that we've been talking about, but some of it's also because it's very connected to not only the drug trade, um, but also the prostitution. And I'm glad that you mentioned OnlyFans because there's so many women now that feel like they don't have anything of value. And so like and that's a whole other show we should do on value and what's valued. I'd love to do a whole show on that, but I won't go into that now. But with the OnlyFans, I kind of have mixed feelings because the thing I like about OnlyFans is that it's eliminated the pimp, right? Like, and so these girls are able to work from home. They're not out on the street. They're physically safe and they're in control. And so I like that. Like, if this is going to be happening, then I'd rather the power be in the hands of the people that want to do it. And as an anarchist, I'm like, I don't believe there should be any laws against prostitution. It's their choice. However, it's not a choice when people have to do it out of a false market, making it so they can't survive doing something legitimate. Okay. So that's very, very different, right? When somebody feels like they have to go and do that because they don't have another way to take care of their kids or pay their rent, or you know what I mean? That is called slavery. That is called slavery, that where they put a whole bunch of pylons with only one little gap to get out and then say, oh, well, you went through that gap on your free will. Well, that's not free will, right? And so the not only the this level of prostitution where it's voluntary or semi-voluntary or levels of voluntary under coercion and duress and no options. And it also bothers me that they're getting taxed on that because I don't think the government should get a cut of that either. I don't think that the government's entitled to a cut of those people's free will exchange. But also when it comes to the SRA and the child trafficking, yeah, a lot of, this is how people get nice houses. They sacrifice, like you said, there's a third world country where they sacrifice one of their children to feed the others. But in our westernized society, it's like that is the sacrificing of the son for yourself, and the Satanists love when you sacrifice your children to them to let them be sexually abused by them. It's kind of a reenactment out of the Bible where it's like
Yeah.
they feel very godlike that you're handing over your son to them, right? Like it's a play on the Bible. And so in order to get into these gated communities, high societies, access these nice properties, you're not getting in there at all unless you're involved in prostitution. And if you listen to Jay Parker, which I think, I'm not sure if you guys have met yet, but he talked a lot about some of these gated communities and how they're all set up by Satanists, where they're literally sharing their children within the gated community. There's only Satanists living in there. This is a thing. And, it's very connected to real estate. Look at Jeffrey Epstein having the most expensive apartment in New York and no education. And, it's so clearly connected to the trafficking.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, if you want to achieve any level of wealth, power, or fame, you do have to, as many musicians and actors are now openly saying, you do have to sell your soul to the devil, literally to these satanic cults. And yeah, it's in the Bible. I'm no Bible scholar, but this whole thing about giving your firstborn to the Lord, right? And so this is the case now. This is the case with people like who become really big in the film industry or in the music industry or in any of these industries. They do have to give their firstborn to the cult, either as a sacrifice, a ritual sacrifice, or their firstborn is transgendered,
Mm-hmm.
So that is actually a thing. And it goes to what you said in our last episode that everybody is a slave. And this is also part of the twisting of human nature is the people, if you think of hierarchy as this triangle, we're at the bottom, but the people in the layers above that are wealthier or have more power, they're still slaves to the layers above them. It just trickles down. So they have a nicer slave existence in a mansion rather than on the street. But nevertheless, they are just as bound to do everything that they are told to do, to hand over their children to be raped, just like someone would at a poverty level. So it's not different. They're still slaves.
I'd say they're even almost more slaves, Max, because it looks prettier on the outside. And I'm glad you said that because I think I've said it on some of my other podcasts. You can't actually be a master without being someone else's slave because it's a hierarchy. You don't get to be outside of the hierarchy and a master to a slave. Like, and from the military too, you see this how, I remember as soon as we finish basic training, you kind of get your first rank and stuff. And then people think they're so great and start treating the new people like crap when they're just one peg up. And there's a lot of psychology behind the more you oppress somebody, they need like to let the steam valve off blow, like, right? So it encourages more abuse. Like they know that people will abuse others if they're abused themselves. And so you see this with people like even people in the military and police, they take a lot of abuse themselves. And then that's why they're needing to go and like vent off this abuse because they've actually like voluntarily went and signed up for abuse themselves. And so they know this. And yeah, I think I mentioned it before. So you think about these people that seem so elite and stuff, but they have no options. The higher up they get, they're actually more in the hierarchy, right? Like we're enslaved because we don't have resources and stuff kind of at the bottom, but like we still are like not the more you get up, I mean, you look at some of these politicians and stuff, like they are completely not allowed to even speak anything without being told what to say. And you know what I mean? If they want anything from you, and this is the same with like gangs or bike gangs or anything, you know what I mean? If they want your wife or they want your girl or your children, like they just tell you and you have no, like you do what you're told. So I mean, it's all an illusion, right? It's all an illusion,
Yeah.
this fake beauty, this fake wealth, this fake being at the top.
Yep. Yeah, we're enslaved because of what we don't have, but they're enslaved because of what they do have, right?
Yeah, and
So,
they're more scared to lose it.
yeah, they're more scared to lose it. They'll comply actually more.
Yeah.
And, what you were saying about the military, it's so true. And I've seen, I haven't been in the military, but I've seen like the movies and, the sergeant or whatever is barking at the people below him or her and making them do 100 push-ups and whatever. And it reminds me also, having been in college here in the US, of what fraternities and sororities do with
Hazing.
hazing, right? Um, it just trickles down. So people are at the bottom of the ladder, and then if they get one or two rungs up, what they want to do is be powerful and squash the people below them. I mean, that's also the Stanford prison experiment and other experiments like that. So, you know, the solution is that we, as a human race, really have to get back to morality. Morality, morality, morality. It sounds old fashioned, but we are perpetuating this system on each other at this point. And
Mm-hmm.
that is the most brilliant warfare tool they have used on us because, like you said, it's really not sustainable. It's too expensive and it's not as good. People tend to push back and rebel when something is forced on them. But when it's about scratching out a living and surviving, and then if you have to sell out or step on your fellow human to do that, it's moment to moment. There's no thinking of our collective future here. But we need to start thinking that way because when one of us goes down, we all go down.
Mm-hmm.
And it's happening today. There's less and less options to I mean, it almost feels like there's no option, like you said, but to be evil if you want to have any semblance of a life.
And to exploit others to survive. Like it's like you can't actually just survive on your own, being like, I'll
Yes.
produce something and keep my own profits. It's like the only people that are actually surviving right now are exploiting others in a vampiric way where they're exploiting others' labor. Like they're not actually producing it themselves. They're like getting all the rents from other people's labor. And those are the people that are actually surviving. They're not actually doing the work themselves. Like you almost have to become a vampire to stay afloat. And so that's kind of the moral line where it's like, are you willing to kind of just let yourself sink a bit, or are you going to vampire and get up? And like you see kind of a divide in people right now, and that's kind of how they set it up, where there's like, well, there's all these people buying all the Airbnbs and stuff, and I'm like, you know, I mean, I'm not gonna say. I mean, I don't know. I'm not gonna act like I'm so much better than anybody. Like, I'm sure if I had a place to rent out, I'm not saying I don't necessarily wouldn't go by the market either, right? Like, you can't really blame people. But when you see kind of this greed of like, okay, well, I'll own four houses and just live off of everyone else working and paying all these exploitative rents, like that is immoral. That is vampiring. That is theft. Like, and it's forced. Like these people don't have the option to not do that. And the last thing I just wanted to add to Max about what you were saying about the pedophilia and the abuse, like when I read survivors' testimonies, there's so often, and I'm sure you can relate, and I'm sorry if this is triggering to bring up, I just comes to mind for me is like when these people are trafficked and taken to parties, right? And I've read this story so many times of some person wanting to just torture that little girl, in a way. And it's like, what is that? What is that need to reenact that? Right. So this kind of, these people are enslaved, and that kind of, same with the military where you get up a little bit, but then you just have this need to like torture the thing beneath you. And it's like, this is why these people that are owning all the real estate and have all the money need to torture kids and sexually abuse kids, because they've killed their inner child. They're not fun. They're not creative. They're not loving. They're not playful. They don't have any of that. They're just in the satanic mindset. And so they need to go and torture like an externalized version of their inner child. And it's like, I've read this story so many times that nobody's going to convince me that's not a real thing that's psychically driving these people. And that's why there's such a connection to this high affluent wealth and the pedophilia. And not just pedophilia, but like torture, sexual torture, and reenacting some type of like sadistic thing onto children. Like it's very highly connected.
Yeah. No, and I mean, a lot of these, it is reenactment. So, you know, uh, all all people who perpetrate have been perpetrated upon. Not everyone has been perpetrated upon goes back to perpetrating, but probably increasing numbers now. So it absolutely is, because if you have to kill the child within you,
which
then
you
you,
do to live this way, right? Like
yes, you
people
have
like
to
you said,
yeah.
Max, people aren't in their creativity, their playfulness. Like you said, people used to like go to shows or hang out or have a barbecue or like whatever. There was like a part of life that was being playful and fun. That's gone for so many people. I think that's increasing even the demand for child pornography.
Yeah. Well, this, you and I have talked in interviews we've done about the transhuman agenda, right? And we see it playing out and, how it's been executed. But more sort of seemingly innocent things have been that progression, like cell phones, like computers, like increasing, entertainment through. So screens are a way to isolate us from each other, to take away real reality, real socialization. When we're together with our bodies next to each other, our heart fields overlap, we produce oxytocin, the nervous system relaxes to have social interaction and like eat a meal together. There's so many benefits, just hugging someone releases all kinds of good things in your body. You feel better. I remember seeing a documentary on blue zones in the world. So the blue zone is a place where people live to be over 100, right? And there were a lot of blue zones, for example, in Italy. And some of the commonalities are like people walking a lot, gardening a lot, being outside, so they're moving their body, and eating clean food. But one of the startling ones is socialization. One of the biggest predictors of longevity is having social connections with others, getting together, talking, singing, dancing. This is what people used to do together. And it makes everyone healthier. It brings up joy. It raises your frequency. You become creative. You start to love and give to others. There's that now, that instinct to share everything you have, your food, your house, it just comes naturally at that level of it. So part of this has been stripping away our social connections, our humanity, our interaction with each other. And we're fooled because we're texting each other and we're looking at a screen and whatever, but it doesn't do the same thing. It's actually part of making us more robotically transhuman. And that's a huge factor in people also being dissociated from the fact that somebody else is a human being too, and it's easier to exploit. It's like in World War I, where they discovered that a lot of the soldiers did not want to shoot and kill the enemy. So then they went to psychiatry to like, okay, let's fix this. By World War II, there was a lot more willingness to assassinate innocent people because they taught people to see them as others, as the enemy, as the Reds or the Japs or whatever it is. So you have to mind control and brainwash people to convince them to harm and look down on a fellow human, because that isn't the natural instinct. And I think that has been facilitated by the isolation through the advent of technology. I think that's a huge factor in promoting satanic ideology and action amongst people as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, that's so obvious with pornography, but okay, just three things. So a really good book of what you just mentioned about how they got people to kill is it's called On Killing, and I can't remember the name of it, but it's a really amazing book all about that and how they started getting the social role modeling of the drill sergeants and all of it. It's the book's name is On Killing. I'm sorry, I don't remember who wrote it, but it's a really good book that people can read. It's not even that long. Highly recommended. Like everyone should read that book. So important what you just mentioned, Max. The other thing too is so what you just said about the heart energy and stuff, and like it's the difference between doing like I've really noticed like doing counseling over the internet is way different than sitting in a room with somebody. Like it's such a huge difference. And I like the fact that we can talk with people online because there's a level of safety there. Like that's what I feel about the OnlyFans. There is some level of safety there for people that to them not being in person. um but sitting in a room with somebody, there's so much unspoken, there's so much psychic information exchange, energetic information exchange without words, like just picking up in the energy field. Like it's just a huge difference than talking to somebody through a screen. um, and so when you look at these high rise houses they're building, also like where everybody's up and away from the earth's magnetic field and disconnected from that, and also in cement things disconnected from each other, it's, you know what I mean? It's like that is really disconnecting people energetically from each other. And of course, that's part of what they were doing with COVID, is everybody staying 6 feet apart, like so that their hearts wouldn't. There is such an energetic, unspoken exchange. um when I took sociology in university, like we really studied Emile Durkheim, who is a French sociologist, and he did a bunch of suicide studies. And like I can't remember when he did them. I think it was anyways, Emile Durkheim, people can look it up. And he talked about something called anomie, which is like people become suicidal because they're not connected to anything. And so he was talking about his main theories was structural functionalism, which is like a main branch of sociology. And structural functionalism is basically like saying that all of humanity is like an organ. So it's like, certain everything has a structure and a function, just like everything in your body has a function, but it's also connected to a system. And then as a whole, we're like a functioning society. And so he was saying that in industrialized societies where people are disconnected, like in cities and stuff, which number one promotes sociopathic immoral behavior because people aren't part of the tribe. They don't always get, like, they're not everything they do is known. And that's another reason why they're pushing everybody into cities and high rises, because of that. But yeah, Max, what you said about the disconnection and people not being social or actually really physically connecting anymore, that really leads to this term, a French term called anomie, right? So anomie is like when you're basically just atomized, and they've done this to everybody. Everybody's like behind the screen, separate. You know what I mean? And they want to promote this more with the pandemics because they want everybody to be paranoid of touching other people, going
Yeah.
to a theater. You know what I mean? It was like that movie with Sandra Bullock. I can't remember what it is. I think it had Sylvester Stallone in it, where they were in the future and everybody just wore bodysuits for sex, like because they were so paranoid of like touching in real life and stuff. And porn's kind of just a stepping stone to that, right? So they want everybody just to be interacting through a screen.
Yeah, no, I remember all the safe sex stuff, now that you bring that up, and like, use this shield, use that shield, put a piece of rubber between you and the other person. Don't kiss, during COVID. Hug the air. It's really, really bad. And, the solution is actually the exact opposite. It is to come together. It is to gather in big social gatherings, which, are fined and prohibited in many cases. And it is to share. Because if everyone came together and got some land and built some houses on that land and grew some food and got some livestock, and somebody, taught the children, and so like if even just as a whole world we started sharing everything we have and helping each other, and like the tribe had to protect all the members of the tribe because it affected the whole tribe, that's still the case. Okay. And if we did that, which is the opposite of the satanic ideology, we would thrive, because it's with cooperation that we get out of this situation, not by going more in the direction that they're hurting us into. So it's actually quite the contrary. It's a really, sometimes I wake up and, I do what I do because of what I've been through. And I just really want people to understand who's running the world behind the curtain, and what the agenda is, and for people not to fall for it. But sometimes it's so dark nowadays that I'm affected. I'm like, I look out there and I'm like, oh my God, you know, just like, it is defeating. No wonder people think, well, I might as well take an injection, a medical assist, and leave the planet. There doesn't seem to be any people. It's also, they fragmented us, obviously, individually with the trauma. We're all, fragmented internally. Then they've really fragmented us from each other with the divide and conquer programs and all of that, and the dog eat dog. But also they've fragmented us from that higher consciousness, from the divinity of what we are, which would be something that would keep us going, which would be a solution also, right? So they want us as isolated from ourselves, each other, and the divine. That's a big formula for getting us into such a state that we can do nothing but turn to them. So I think that's where it does seem really dire to me some days too. I feel defeated, I'm not going to lie. But the solution is still to put ourselves back together individually, to come back together, as people, and to reconnect with who we really are. That's going to be the only way out of this, in my opinion.
Yeah, and something for people to keep in mind that I just had to like kind of tell myself this morning is from what I've read in the SRA books, I remember, I can't remember what book I read it in, but this girl was saying they did some type of programming on her where they would like abuse her and give her so much rage, and like all she was allowed to do was hit herself, which sounds irrational, but like when there's so much rage, like it has to be even internalized, and women usually internalize it more than men. But that's a real psychology that they're trying to get us to harm ourselves, right? Like where whether it's with drugs and alcohol, whether it's with there's multiple ways to abuse yourself, but just for people to be really mindful of that when you're doing something that's abusive to yourself. It's like, are you doing that in reaction to something that's coming to you from the outside and you feel powerless, so then you start abusing yourself? Because that is a tactic they use. I'm pretty sure I read it in the psychology books too, how they talk about how a person will start, they can't just like ignore, like either has to go outward or inward, and they know this, so they put so much pressure on you because it's like and then they offer you these things to kill yourself with. They
Yeah.
offer you the assisted suicide. In Canada we have vending machines with free crack pipes and free drugs for people, and they're just always offering you everything to basically destroy yourself with, including pornography and including all of these things that are just like, here, take your evil medicine. You know what I mean? There's just like a buffet of things. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like people
Sugar,
just,
alcohol,
yeah,
it's
like,
all
you know,
there. Processed food, fast food, um, addictive TV watching or screen watching. I mean, you name it, it's a form of that. Exactly.
and it's so
Sorry, I just
cult.
wanted to
It's so
insert.
cult because the least effective way is for them to like force stuff on you. But when they just make you under duress and then offer you stuff, it's like that's kind of their form of martial arts, right? Where they're like, oh, like I basically made you defeat yourself, right? And so just remember that, like for real, like that is a tactic being used. So just catch yourself when you're like internalizing something onto yourself. That's exactly what they want you to do. So like just for people to kind of like pay attention when that's happening, because that's a real thing they're really doing right now.
Yeah. And I want to leave it, we'll wrap up, but I want to leave it with, they want us to destroy ourselves. They don't want us to know how powerful we are, that we have this creative divine spark and we can move matter with our minds, okay? That is who we are. So they don't want us to live or thrive or create or get out of this situation that we're in, and yet we can. We have that choice. And the more of us that make that choice, and the more of us that work together to pool our resources and make that space bigger, that's the way that we can get out of this. But, we have to get over the fact that we want to drug ourselves, drink ourselves, sex ourselves into oblivion because of all the pain and the what's perceived out there as the nothingness that they've created. But that's their satanic reality. They are a service to self. Their path reaches a ceiling, and there's nothing. There's no life beyond that. It's death. Okay. So yeah, that's not that, no, who wants that, right? But there is another path. There is a service to others path. There is a path where you go towards your highest potential, towards your divinity, towards your soul, where there's all manner of different levels of consciousness and opportunity that you can reach. So it is also a magic trick, okay? So it's not real. This reality is not real. It's engineered at every effing level, okay, to make us choose this.
Yeah.
Collective realities collectively manifested from our collective consciousness. That's what had us create, but that's also the way out for us. So, it's like, what do we want to do? I think really it's going to be up to us ultimately how we address this scenario. So why don't you wrap it up with whatever you think you can offer in that vein?
I think I actually pretty much said everything I wanted to say. The only last kind of thing is they're really promoting with the screen thing this kind of vicarious living where you're not really alive, but like you're watching a movie, or you don't have a relationship, but you're watching pornography, or you don't yet really have friends, but you're like, in chat groups, or like, you know what I mean? So, and then with the type of virtual reality, like video games and stuff like that, it's like you're in your box, not, it is like the movie The Matrix, like where you're just in your box, not actually really living, right? And so I just think that's kind of the last thing to keep in mind is, like going out in a garden is really living. Meeting a friend in person for coffee is really living. Walking on a beach, having a dog, like those are real things. And I think just like it's this counterfeit virtual reality within a reality that they're pushing more and more and more. And it's just, I just kind of want to leave people with like that last thing to sort of pay attention to, like what's real and what's not real, because the stuff that's not real is not fulfilling, and that's why everybody feels so empty, because it's not real.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said, Jaymee. Well, thank you. I think we're talking about some really, really important things that are relevant right now, right now as we speak for us and for everybody else. So, um, as always, thank you for being here, for having these conversations. I do hear feedback that a lot of people feel really empowered and helped and develop a deeper understanding through what we're putting out. So I'm really glad that we're doing it. And, that's something that you and I are contributing. No one's paying us to do this. In fact, I pay for the Zoom and the website and the editing and all this stuff. But this is us using our creative light, love for humanity to try to make a difference. So I feel satisfied. So I don't feel that level of despair because I'm trying to do something. So what if all of you out there just try and do something, you know, however small, just try and do something to
Yeah, and it
make your
feels good.
life
I
better.
always say I don't like, so many people try to get me to charge money to people, and I'm like, especially for SRA survivors, I'm like, no, they've already been stolen from. It's their, I don't want to commodify everything. Like it's really a choice for me to try and Mark Passio explains it really well. Like when you're making your decisions based on money, that is an act of worship. Your God is money. If you're making actual decisions, those are tangible, actual things you're doing in reality. They're not just constructs. You're actually doing physical acts in the world based on the incentive of money. Then you're worshiping what you're basing your acts on. And if you're doing it on money, that is what you're worshiping. And so, in order to try and be out of that and make your decisions outside of the structure of the money incentive, it is a challenge. And me and you, Max, both do that. And I love doing it. Like I love being able to do stuff for people and say, no, I'm just doing it because it's right and I want to do it. It's like that is amazing and I love doing it. But there's a certain tipping point where it's like I'm not going to be able to do it if I have to pay $4,000 for like a
Yeah,
place to stay. I'm just not going to like, it makes it, and that's what they want. They want it so that people don't have the time and the energy and the resources to be giving and generous. That's what they want. So like we have to fight to keep being able to be generous and keep contributing our gifts and keep giving, because that's exactly like I said, the money's all fake. They don't need it. They don't need everybody paying rent. They just don't want us doing other good things. And so
that's
every
right.
time we all do something good, that is an act of rebellion.
Yeah. And it feeds our souls. That's why we feel good. What feels good? Helping someone, giving. I mean, I don't have a lot of money, but in moments when something crosses my path, like there was a homeless guy with his two dogs and it was like below freezing, I paid for a motel for them. I could only afford to put them up for one night, but that one night, the guy when I left was jumping on the bed with the dogs. He was so happy, that fed my soul, you know. Um, you know, you see an animal in a shelter who's abandoned, and you can afford to rescue that animal and love them and bring them into a home. Do that. Okay. You're you know, you're walking down the street, you see someone who dropped their grocery bag all over the street, stop and help them pick up their items. You know, smile at someone at the cashier when you're checking out of a store. Like, you can do such small things that shed a little bit of love and a little bit of light out there. And those things, because reality being the way it is, those things do make a difference. And they make a difference to you because you know when you give something, whether it's a smile or a gift or anything or a helping hand, you feel good. Your frequency goes up, okay? Because it's nourishing your soul. And this is what we have on these psychopaths. They don't have any access to their heart or their soul. They can't feel that way. That's why they're always so greedy, like you said, because there's the hole in them can never be filled, but we can fill it with the opposite, with love, right? With being genuine, with doing acts of kindness, whatever is in your power to do, and do one every day. You know, just do one every day.
Yeah, and altruism terrifies them because it's irrational, and like these are the kind of acts of rebellion that their AI minds can't understand because it's irrational. It's not within the incentive structure, and so this is really a way to like bypass and evade them in the game of chess because they just can't understand the irrational behavior. They can't understand rational, and that's why it's like that is our tool to harness because it can't even really track us. Like it can't understand why we're doing things or the motivation for doing it. And so yeah, I just they are terrified of people not being motivated by money, not being altruistic, being generous, being love centered, not caring about what's in it for them. Like that kind of stuff is exactly why they're keeping the price of everything so high because they're so terrified of people tapping into that.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Jaymee. It was good to see you. And I look forward to the next time. We never usually know what we're going to talk about, but I think the last two episodes we did were really good topics. So we'll see whatever comes up next. And so I'll talk to you then.
Thanks, Max.